Welcome to the next podcast. I have titled today Identity Change, and I have actually a special guest for today. This is my son in love, who is Dre Graves. Hi,
Hey.
Dre. And to be honest with you, I actually recorded this whole entire episode. And at the very end, when I recorded it, I shared a story about Dre in that recording. And then I pushed stop and I was sitting there going, oh my goodness, what if I had him on here? What if I had him come on? And so I decided to just re-record today's episode because I thought it was valuable to have him on and to share some of the things that he has gone through. But anyway, that's a setup of this. So welcome, Dre. I can't wait to get into the conversation. But today is March the 5th, and we're on day 64. So before we get into the devotion, you need to read the morning rinse, which is Esther 8 through 10. And we are actually on the very last day of Esther, and so excited to finish this book. I just love her and her life and the things that she represented and just all the things. So go ahead and read the verses or the chapters and come on back and we'll talk about the featured verse. Okay, so today's featured verse is Esther 8:17. In each and every province and in each and every city, wherever the king's commandment and his decree arrived, there was gladness and joy for the Jews, a feast and a holiday. And many among the peoples of the land became Jews, for the dread of the Jews had fallen on them. So I loved this story because it talks about identity change. And so I brought Dre on here because there's been some significant changes in his life. But when we're talking about Esther and to kind of set up this whole entire story, the question evolves is what made other nationalities want to become a Jew, and what made them want to change their whole entire identity and change who they were. I mean, sometimes the fear of not becoming something will actually overshadow remaining the same. And so even though they feared the Jews, they also wanted to become something more. So they chose to become something new. And I want to pause there because these people back in that land, they saw something and they wanted to become something more. So they chose to become something new. And Dre has been making some really dynamic choices with becoming something new. And I thought that this day would be super insightful and bring you in and talk about some of the things that you've chosen to make new in your life and bring you in on this. And so I know that you guys read the devotional and listen to the podcast and stuff, so you kind of understand a lot of it. But
Yeah.
what has been kind of something that has, some significant things that have caused you to choose to become something new within your life?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And most importantly, thank you for inviting me to share. I'm really excited to be here. I love your podcast. I love what you're doing. The mission's phenomenal. It's really been changing, and that's kind of the start. That's kind of how I believe that's how you embrace change and bring things to becoming new. And that's starting something new. And so some of the things I've done, I've made it simple, start my day with the podcast, right? Start our day with focusing on Christ and worshiping and giving thanks. Like that's just the littlest thing that we can do. And that's tiny, right? And so with the consistency of building that up, I was like, okay, now I'm going to take these messages and apply them. And so some of the little things I've done that's changed me completely, and I think I shared with you the other day, is my music, right? I love all sorts of genres of music. And, I've learned that like there's Christian, like rap, hip hop, all kinds of songs, all kinds of different music that doesn't advocate for things that I don't live like or I don't believe in. And if I want to be in the mood to get excited to work out, I can still, do it in a healthy way, a inspiring way, with what I'm listening to. And it's just the same way as we sing songs and hymns, as you saw in the Bible. That's our way of worshiping, right? So if I'm singing these songs about murdering people or, doing anything wild or insane, right? That's the same thing. And that's not me. That's not who I am. So if I'm going to find identity in Christ, then I have to speak that way. I have to keep those things around me or change those things that are in front of me. And so when we change the way that we live, when we change those little decisions, the things that we, influence or are influenced by, and understand what that does, what we're ingesting, what we're giving out. For me, that was like the start of change. I was like, okay, I can't sit here and claim I'm a Christian, but the type of things that entertain me are X, and so that's like the number one thing that I think really like alerted me. And what I've learned when I did just that little thing is my mood, like my energy. Like I was asking Haley, my wife, I said, I'm gonna get on the podcast and talk with mom about, the changes that I've done. What have you noticed? And I asked her and she told me, she's like, to be honest with you, just the joy that you have, the energy of joy, like going throughout your day. If you have a long day, I don't feel it. I don't feel like, oh, you got a long day, don't bother. Sometimes people have that type of energy. And so I'm just way more slower to respond to things. I feel the joy of every day of getting up and being more present. Not that I wasn't, but the yearn for more. And that's, exciting, and that's good to hear when, your family sees, when I'm someone that works really hard and very passionate about doing well and being on top of whatever my responsibilities are. But right, are they feeling the good end? Are they feeling the brunt of it? Are they actually enjoying that with me? Right? It's no fun when you win by yourself and no one's there to celebrate with you. And so I feel like that's kind of like how it is with us chasing God. It's the same, like, right? We need to be able to do it in a way where we're constantly growing and making these little changes so that way everybody can build off of it and grow from, because that's the ultimate goal, right? Is that community. And so I think that's, something that change has done for me, and I've done to change my faith and lean more towards God and dive in.
I mean, like, you're a living example of wanting something more for not just yourself, but for your family. And, honestly, when I wrote this devotional, I asked myself, I wonder if my family is even going to read this. And I had this like inkling of, I don't want to have any expectations. I know I'm supposed to gift them, their own copies and just make sure that they have it. But when you told me how that you guys have started really delving into it and have marital goals for that, I cannot tell you how cool it was to hear that you are wanting that something more and you guys are choosing to become something new. And that in and of itself, you're living and breathing and walking this whole faith journey out. And to see you guys grow in this from where you were back years ago is just super cool. And it's very exciting to, see people's faith grow, because then obviously that's just going to overflow into other people around you. So that was super cool. And when, talking about Esther's, when the people around Esther, of the other people of the other lands, when they saw the nation of Israel fighting for something bigger than themselves, which was their identity, their faith, and then they watched God win in the end, it ended in a celebration. And so basically in yesterday's podcast, I talked about the decree of what was signed. And so basically the whole, in a nutshell, Esther's story is that there was a decree that was signed, and on a specific day, all of the people who were around that were not Jews were given permission to go and exterminate the Jews. And it was the day that was set up, and the Jews basically couldn't do anything about it. It was the law set where it was the day, and they couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't defend themselves or anything. And so Esther went on behalf of her nation and interceded for her nation, and they re-signed a decree. They that day of the attack could not be overturned, but what they did was they signed this decree that was read about in today's morning rents. And this decree was, okay, Jews, you have now the ability to fight for yourselves, and you have the ability now to defend yourselves. And so all the people of the land saw this happen. They actually saw that Israel was fighting for something bigger than themselves. And then they watched that God interceded for them, and they won. And this celebration ended. And this celebration it's now called Purim. It's actually on the Jewish calendar. It's called Purim. And it's this big holiday where they've got gift giving and parades and this big feasting. And I've read commentary about this specific day where they say that the Purim, which is the 14th day of Adar, is one of the most joyous and fun holidays of the entire Jewish calendar. And it basically acknowledges that the Jewish people living in Persia were saved from this extermination by being allowed to defend themselves. And Esther and Mordecai were the heroes. And yet this feast of Purim was never the end goal. Like, they didn't set out to fight for themselves and have this big feast. The goal was to look and to make sure that she maintained her identity. Esther wanted to make sure that her people were able to survive and to maintain their identity. And that is such a cool story, because Esther fought and the Jews fought, but the other people around them saw what they were fighting for. And that is when we make change. And when you fall in love with who you are, it defines what you do, and ultimately it impacts those who are watching your life. And that is something that I feel like you, Dre, and Haley have really embraced. I mean, I love the daily challenges that are in my devotional, and sometimes there might be challenges that aren't necessarily applicable, and then others, it's like people can make literally big, huge changes, which is what you guys have been doing. And those what I call identity-based behaviors or identity-based changes. And I feel like you guys have been doing that. People are going to see your identity-based behaviors, and it's going to impact their identity as well, which is so exciting, because
Yes.
Esther risked her life to save her identity. And as we continue to fall deeper in love with God, our decisions every single day, even the little ones, are going to begin to change, because Jesus came to change our identity. And I love some of the examples that you have given me and that we've talked about. And I know there are more. I know there are more things that you guys have done.
There is.
Yeah.
There is. I mean, there's a lot more that we've done. And like you said, we made it a goal for us to change for the better. We started our marriage at a young age, or our relationship at a young age. And so for us, that was the goal, is that we know that there's more in us. And so for us, that's what we've done. We've made it a priority to read the Bible together. We've made it a priority to pray for each other together. We've changed just the simple things that has done a multitude of things for us. We have now this type of energy and aura in our household that you can feel, that's loving and partnering and teamwork oriented. We had a crazy weekend and we didn't even have to talk. We both knew, okay, let's get up and counter off of each other and keep carrying through and making sure we both had time for ourselves just to wind down and do it again. So it was really good to see how this little bit of work prepares us for little battles that we probably would have struggled through beforehand. And so just being together and at the same time, for me, just making it a priority, right? It's the same way as if I got to get up to brush my teeth, I have to get up to do anything else is the priority. That's my priority, is to give thanks to God and make time for him before I start my day and before I go to bed. And those things are things that I've done. And now I've made it to where it's throughout the day that I do a prayer for things, or I do, reach out and make sure I do my journal ahead of time if I get, overwhelmed. So that's just always just making it a priority, just like I make it as to exercise or anything else. It's such a priority to make these changes, but stick to them. And so for anyone that does do this type of thing, it is challenging when you add on something that's new and creating something new. And for me, my word of the year was growth. And I wanted to grow in my faith. I wanted to grow in my family. I wanted to grow in our finances. Those are things that I really wanted to do. And the first one and the key one is my faith. Without God, there's nothing for us. There's nothing that we have. And He's provided everything that we have till this day. And so I give thanks for that. And I take a step back, and just every time I drive in my neighborhood for our home we've been a homeowners for a year. I give thanks every single time. I wasn't doing that beforehand, but when you think about it, you go back, like when we came back from our trip, I was just thanking God that I got to be here and now I get to go back to a home. That's such a blessing. And so for me, gratitude has magnified. And so when you have that, as you can tell, like you're way more focused on what God has done for you as what He has yet to do for you. And so for me, I've been able to continue to grow that way, to just be prepared to battle whatever it is that comes my way, whatever it is, right? I feel so much more prepared because that's where my focus lies. My focus isn't lying on the battle. It's lying on my faith in God and what tools and supplies that He's geared me up to have. So I'm really excited for this journey. So I'm really grateful for it. I really am grateful for these nuggets that you've dropped in our life, that we've been able to dive into the Bible and break down really how we're living our life. And I've learned so much from what I thought was a Christian attitude, as opposed to reading and understanding, like, okay, this is what you do. Like, this is your lifestyle. It's not just only on Sunday, right? This is an everyday, around the clock faith and love for God. So for me, those changes, I'm not all the way there yet. I'm not perfect, but there's always a start. And so for me, like I said, I start my day with our devotional. I pray with my wife over my family. I pray for our food. We pray for our food. We pray before we go to sleep, and we give thanks for the day. And ever since, we've just started taking steps further and further.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, our goal really should not just be to get saved and then let's get saved and then we're going to make it to heaven and then that's it. Because if that were our goal, if that were our end goal, then our behavior would be based merely on what we want the outcome to be. And therefore I got saved and therefore I'm going to heaven and I don't have to do anything else. But when we allow Jesus to begin to change our identity and our daily choices become based on who we want to be, to become more like Him. And that's when our identity based decisions come into play. And that's where, like the Jews at Esther's time, they were like so proud of who they were, and they were willing to fight to save that identity and to be, those people and to stay alive, and then what happened was this led the other people in the land to change their identity and become something new because they watched what happened in those lives. And I guess that big question is, who are we becoming? Who do we say we are? And once we believe full-heartedly in our identity, then it's not going to be hard to change our actions because they're going to align up with that same belief. And we'll not only do things because we know we should, we will begin to act like who we already are. And that has been really exciting to watch you do that, because it's notably different. It's notably different, and when our behavior and when our behavior and our identity line up, then that behavior change becomes so easy because you believe that you are that person, and that's what happened. Like the people became Jews. So they then started acting like Jews and celebrating with the Jews. They became Jews. Those around you will see your identity-based decisions. And this is how we impact the world, one person at a time. And I just am so excited just to see how your family dynamics is changing like all the time, getting closer and closer to Jesus. And the fact that you guys read every morning, and really putting God as your center focus, because it wasn't always like that. And changing to be that way is so cool. So
It's the best decision that it's the best correction, is what I will say, right? We've made a decision to love Christ and pursue him. But the correction we've made is how we pursue him, right? And the pursuing of what it is our role is in this world that God has instilled for us. And I've never lived this world before. So I can't go out here and act like I know. And so, through Christ, as he orders my steps, that's what I take my faith in. And so,
yeah.
it's exciting. Like I love it. I love the changes that are to be made. I'm looking forward to continuing to grow. So like I said, it's just awesome. I'm excited, and in the book of Esther, that's really exactly what it's been like. It's just insane. We Haley and I made this exotic, I would say, life switch. It's not exotic, but it's just a life switch to really dedicate, right? We really want to dedicate the way that we live our lives. And we've already been on a trip to Cabo this year. Like, our life has changed. And it's just and for that reason, why I say that is God allowed us to come together and have a time, knowing that we have 4 kids. We're constantly busy. I'm working. She's home. She's at home, homeschooling, taking care of the kids, measuring our daughter's symptoms of things that goes on with her diabetic needs. So it's really ongoing for her. And so we had time to sit down and just really be with each other and explore our faith. And during that time away, we didn't neglect it. And that's the most challenging thing. When you find something, when you make a change, and when you change your setting, right? It's really great to be at home and do these things. But when you go out in the world and do it, that's when you really see the change. Her and I, for the first time, we were reading our Bible together outside of our home. Obviously, at church, we'll do that. But we were in paradise of a spot, we could have been doing all kinds of other things, but that's what we decided to do, in the morning. Each morning is read our Bible together. And that was, for me, that was one of the most beautiful things to experience, because that is what I've always wanted, right? But I also wasn't always the one taking leadership into ensuring that we're doing that. And so for me, I feel like these little changes have brought out more of the man of God in me than I've ever experienced before. And so I'm just more excited to learn more, and I'm yearning for more, as I've always said, right? So becoming more and more of what is in store for me and what God has planned for me. So I'm motivated. It's really exciting, and I can see why in the book of Esther, why they all celebrate it, because it's just like, it's really, really exciting when you get to feel the presence of God in a way that isn't from a disaster or from, something where it's like, God, come save me. It's more of a, God, I see you, you see me. Like, yes, this is great to come together just to say hi and experience your presence. It's different when you have that kind of perception to choose to go after God. And so for me, that's really what it's been. It's been kind of just remaining in the presence on a term of a friendship, on a term of a fatherhood, and a term of all those things, because like I said, I've grown up with lots of adversity. And so I've had lots of distractions. And so that's the world, right? And when you identify the worldly flesh things that go on and what isn't really meant for us to put our time into, our faith into, or idolize into, and you make that just the little changes, just those little changes where you shift over to, hey, these are things that are part of the world, but this is the Father who has your answers. This is the one who orders your steps. This is the one who's going to take you where you're going to go. That, to me, has what I've felt the most of, like, wow, these little changes, right? My music, my attention, and my time. Those are the littlest things that I've changed. And obviously, my daily practices, but those little things that I changed, I've already seen and felt way more closer and comfortable with my faith and who I am, and just wanting to know more about, where I'm headed in my faith. So I'm excited. I love it.
Yeah, well, you actually said a couple of key things, when you are growing in your faith, because you're making those identity-based decisions and people around you are seeing them. And this is how we impact the world. Well, this story is one of the stories that I shared when I recorded it by myself. And I wanted to bring it up again because you mentioned you went to a trip to Cabo. You had actually won a Circle of Excellence award. And so you were honored at this executive trip. And you got up and you had a speech. And we were able to actually see this speech because Haley recorded you talking about it. And one of the first things, actually the first thing that you said is that you thanked God and gave God honor for, you being there and winning the award. And nobody else had said that. And so I shared in the, in this re-record or the other previous recording, how that you stood up and you made an identity-based decision in that moment to profess that you were a man of faith and that you thanked God for being in this position and getting this award, and that you're thanking God for what you're doing in your life. And people around you actually came up and said some things to you, right? After that?
They did. They were honestly surprised that I said something like that in a corporate setting, just because of those type of conversations that you don't speak of, which is religion or political things. Those are things that people are very hesitant to say, and so they kind of commended me and just told me they really loved it because they too were seeing that, because I said God brought us through a lot and we're here today, here in Cabo in a paradise that's wonderful, and they were like, yeah, like I wanted to say that and I didn't, so thank you for saying that, so it was really cool to see that. And I had no idea. I didn't think anything of it. I thought that was a given, that's what we do.
Well, we do. That is another point too. It's like when we become more and more and more closer to Jesus, there are things that are just going to be like in our minds a given, like this is something that we'll do, kind of a thing. And those are those identity-based decisions that become easier and easier and easier because our belief system changes first, and then we start to make our decisions based upon that, and it becomes easy because that's who we are. And I was so impressed by that, because you were making a bold statement in front of your colleagues and peers and people who are executives over you, and you were the only one that said anything of that nature. And yet that is what people saw and heard. And that is how we impact the world, one person at a time. Just one person at a time, one decision at a time. And they're all identity-based decisions when and that is the identity change that I wanted to talk about today, because we saw in Esther's story how that all these people saw and chose to become Jews based upon what they witnessed and how they saw God winning in their lives. And people are going to see God winning in your life, and you're going to go through difficult times. That's not abnormal. I mean, everyone's going to go through difficult times and hard challenges, but it's how we respond and how we, align ourselves with, okay, God, how do you want us to make, our next decision on this? And those are how we impact the world, because our people are going to see how we respond to life's challenges. And that's when they're going to know, oh, wow, this is real.
Couldn't agree anymore. And like I said, those are those changes, right? Because to prepare us for those moments to step up and speak up. And it's exactly what, you said that. And that makes me really way more excited than I was before, because that was a defining moment. That was in front of my president. That was in front of all of our VPs. That was in front of all the execs and the CEO of the company. And I didn't get any backlash. There was definitely okay about it, but they were all inspired, and so it was exciting. That was exciting. And I'm excited that, you were able to identify that for me, because I didn't even think of it that way. I really didn't think of that as identifying. And that is, that's really, that's important to do and speak out. So that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, as you know, on my podcast, I have daily challenges to dig deeper in our faith. And from this devotion, I had a challenge to ask the viewer, to ask people after they have read this devotion, what 3 changes can someone make today that will help them align with their identity? One example is how we talk. I mean, you, Dre, have have been working on changing the way you talk. I mean, just that joy that you mentioned, however maybe it's the way that you've changed in how you respond. The people who are listening to this and who are watching this on YouTube could take your identity or your examples and could literally say, oh, I never really thought about changing my music or changing, being more joyful or whatever. And so you could be impacting and giving other people ideas on how to make those changes, those little tweaks, those little sharpenings on how they can make those changes to be more identity based versus just the way that we've always done it, One, you'll laugh at this, because one example that I write in my devotional is, could it be that maybe changing the way you speak could be a way to align more with God? And Haley and the kids, they grew up and they knew this, but I had a real aversion to the word stupid, and I still do. It still bothers me. But when they were growing up, I don't know if Haley's ever told you this or not, but when the kids were growing up and I was raising them, I would not allow the word stupid to be in our conversation. And so it was like a word that was banned from our household, because when we say, oh my goodness, that was stupid, or when, we say, well, I'm stupid, our brain doesn't necessarily differentiate between, oh, was she like serious or was she joking? It becomes part of our brain is a computer. And when we put something into our brain spits it out. And so I banned that word from growing up, and I never let the kids call themselves stupid or call each other stupid or even actions. So, now I think they probably use that word. I don't know. But for me, that was my way of saying, I want to enforce and have my kids speak life over themselves and over even situations and even over others. And yeah, do we make like goofy decisions? Yes. But that is like one example that Haley probably never told you about. She's probably going to watch this and go, yep, I know.
Well, she applies that principle. That's a phenomenal principle. It's important. I think it's a great principle. And she does. She's still, to this day, she has that principle in our house as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, other examples, maybe somebody might need to make some action-based decisions like what you did, maybe changing their music. Or there could be somebody here that's watching it that maybe smokes, and maybe they need to lay their cigarettes down and say, I am no longer a smoker. I guess, so that challenge is, just ask yourself, what can you do or what can you say differently that will cause this string of new actions that will solidify your identity? And, so I'm wanting just to encourage those people who are watching it and joining with Dre and I just to be mindful of those things, because there's people who are watching your decisions. And if you are a Christ follower, just like what Dre said earlier, is like, if I'm going to say that I'm a Christian, I'm better be reading my Bible and doing these things, because there's always somebody watching, and they are going to be watching. And whether it's, we all make identity-based decisions, but who is our identity based on, And so if we are Christ followers, these challenges are so good to live out, right?
I agree. I couldn't agree anymore. Limiting the distractions is the ultimate key. And if you can identify them first, that's the first place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. So when people are pulling up their devotional and tonight, when they're pulling out their journal, based upon today's conversation and based upon today's devotion, I want you to just really ask God, what identity-based decisions did God talk to you about today? Was there any redefining or tweaking or any of that as you're going through your day? Maybe there's a situation that happened where, I normally would have responded this way, but I'm making identity-based decisions in Christ. And so therefore, I'm going to respond this way now, and or choose to do this now, or choose to go this place now, or not go to this place now. So documenting those things, and then when you pull it up years down the road and you'll see the date there, you'll be amazed at how much your growth is, and all the things that, you know, have changed throughout your life. This is why I just love what God did through this devotional and what have you. So you were definitely a great guest, Dre, and I'm so glad that you came on today. And I know that your story and your life and your decisions are going to inspire people who are watching and or listening to this podcast today. And I'm so grateful that you came on today with me.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. So I hope today inspired you as a viewer and a listener. Tomorrow we start on a new book. So until tomorrow, okay, Dre, you got to say it with me. Until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. Let's try that again. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Until tomorrow, keep rinsing,
reflecting, and
repeating. Thank you. See you tomorrow.